اهلا بكم مشاهدينا وحلقه جديده اوراق دبلوماسيه. متعودين كل مره نكون في ضيافه احدى الدول، والنهارده هنكون مع بعض في ضيافه سفاره المملكه الهولنديه. تعالوا مع بعض نقابل السفير ونشوف هيقول لنا. Mr. Gérard ستيخس, we are really honored to interview you and having you in our channel. Thank you very much for accepting the interview.
It's a pleasure to me to do it.
At the very first, we really want to know more about your personal life out of your CV, your full name, your age, and you have kids or no?
I'm 55 years old and have been working for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands since 1985. I started out in the Netherlands. Our first job is always in headquarters, and after that I had immediately my first experience in the Arab world, in Iraq, in Baghdad. This was in 1988 that I got there. So if you know your history, you know that in 1990 we had the big conflict with Kuwait and Iraq. So I was there. Very exciting times. So my first experience in the...
It wasn't really easy for you?
It was, I think, if I look back, it wasn't easy, but I was young and it was very exciting. And you probably know as a newsmaker that it is very interesting to be in the center of the news, to be where things happen.
It's kind of scary, not interesting.
I was too fascinated to be scared, I think. There was only one moment that I was scared, at the moment that we thought that there was going to be an attack on Baghdad, and I was still there. But for the rest, it's more, as a young diplomat, an enormous experience to be in the middle of world news, to see things that are going to be history later on. And we realized all at that moment already that this was history happening before our eyes. I was also sent to Kuwait then to evacuate the Dutch population in Kuwait. They couldn't leave the country because Saddam Hussein wouldn't allow any foreigners to leave the country. So we had to bring about 50 Dutch people from Kuwait to Baghdad to keep them safe in Baghdad. That was also quite an interesting experience. It was not easy, no. Kuwait was occupied territory at that time. There were lots of Iraqi soldiers and other people stealing things and robbing banks and shops. So it was not safe. The Dutch population there was frightened. Didn't really want to go to Baghdad because they thought that Baghdad was...
The same situation will be in Baghdad.
They thought it was worse in Baghdad. They thought the bad people that we see in Kuwait, they are from Baghdad, so why would you want to go to Baghdad? But in the end, I managed to convince them that it was better for everybody to have them where the embassy was still working, because our embassy in Kuwait, of course, had to close down because of the occupation. So in the end, I was able to persuade them to come to Baghdad in a convoy by car. And then they stayed with us as international hostages, as so many other people, for a couple of months until they were able to go home just before Christmas in that conflict. And you also learn very well to be careful with what you promise. Never promise too much, be always realistic, and help people to the extent that you can help. Don't go make promises beyond that. This
is what we don't do in Arab nations. We might have too much promises.
I don't think that that is necessarily a problem, but it's very tempting if somebody is in trouble to promise that you can do everything to help them. which is not true usually. And you should be, even though you want to do everything or promise everything, you should be realistic in saying what you actually can do. Because if you promise too much and you can't deliver, people will get upset or angry or even worse with you. And that is what you don't want.
And then you continued your diplomatic journey?
I did. I was after that posted to Washington. Very, very interesting times, and worked in the World Bank with our executive director there. Again, it was a very, very interesting experience. This was the time that the Soviet Union was collapsing into all these different republics.
You are really choosing your times.
This was definitely true. And the Netherlands was in the middle of that in Washington in the World Bank, because we started to represent within the World Bank Ukraine, the new country Moldova, the new country Armenia, and the new country Georgia. So these for us were also very interesting times. I was asked by my boss at that time to go as one of the first representatives of the World Bank to Armenia, and to explain to Armenia what it meant to be in the World Bank and how you can borrow money from the World Bank for your economic reconstruction. Very, very interesting times, I can tell you. I should say that I have had a blessed career as a diplomat. I've done lots of interesting things where I could have done, of course, very boring things. After that I went to Russia. Okay. And this was Russia in the later period of Boris Yeltsin. There was the big financial crisis while I was there. The ruble deteriorated to the extent that at a certain moment they decided that 10,000 ruble was going to be 1 ruble, because otherwise the denominations of the currency were getting too big. And we were witnessing the first blossoming of this very strange kind of Russian capitalism. So again, it was a fascinating period for me.
You have really too much stories to tell to your kids and your grandkids.
I do. I have 2 children. They are now in Scotland studying. One in Edinburgh and one in Glasgow, and they know some of the stories, but I'm saving some of them up for my grandchildren, I guess.
Knowledge of the Netherlands is limited in the Arab world. We know about that it's a part of the European Union, but we don't have too much information as Arab nations about the Netherlands.
I'm always saying the Netherlands is a small country with a huge economy. We are, for example, the 2nd biggest exporter of agricultural products after the United States. In a world scale, we are within the top 20 of big economies. We have a huge trade sector that primarily imports and exports to other European countries. But also here in Egypt, we are a big player in trade. We are the 7th biggest importer from Egypt, with the 4th biggest exporter to Egypt. And we have invested, as the Netherlands in Egypt, $2.5 billion. So I always like to say, you know, we may be small in size and population, but if you look at our economy, our economic achievements, we are really one of the countries to watch in the world, I would say.
Strengthening the links between the Dutch nation and the Dutch people and the Arab people. How did you do this, and how you can find this will affect the strong relationships between the two countries?
For that answer, you have to know first of all that the Netherlands has a very unique constitution. We have an article in our constitution that tells us that we should support international legal order, that we should always support international legal structures. So all of us as diplomats of the Netherlands, we always feel we have to work for better international relations, better international law. Mm-hmm. That is also what we bring to Egypt, I think, as the Netherlands. You had revolutions in 2011 and in 2013. These revolutions, from where I stand, were all about trying to create a transition in Egypt towards more democracy, towards rule of law, towards more influence of the population on government in Egypt. These are things that for us around the world are of immense importance. Mm-hmm. So for us, we try to contribute to what Egypt is trying to achieve in its own country in these areas. We do that by offering our assistance where you want to have it. We do that by engaging with all the people that are busy with these processes, and in general by being supportive.
I heard that the embassy works together with the National Council for Women to prepare the potential women willing to go to pass through the next elections.
We are trying to also indeed help Egypt to establish an equal playing field for all population groups, be they men and women, be they of different sides of the political or economic spectrum. Where we can, we try to assist Egyptian organizations that try to work on these areas. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Supporting also the younger girls who cannot have enough education.
We have one project that we finance through, again, an Egyptian NGO, where we try to give an education to girls that dropped out in Upper Egypt. Very often girls drop out of school at a very young age, and they come out of school then with very limited skills in the sense of writing, reading, arithmetic. What we finance in Upper Egypt, this is one of the things we do, is a program where these dropped out girls still can get some kind of education, so that they can maintain their household better, so they can be better mothers to their children, better wives to their husbands, because they just have more general knowledge than they were able to pick up in the school because they had to drop out so early.
Supporting the people who has less luck in many things. How this will affect the exchange of culture between the two countries?
I think what we try to establish is a society wherever you go that offers people to live up to their own potential. And how do you do that? By offering a platform to every person to do whatever they do best. I think it's up to people themselves to realize the possibilities that are given. But one thing that society, that a government has to offer to its people is that platform, the possibility to excel, to be good at something. And I think that is also what we try to bring to a country like Egypt in the cooperation, that we try to share our experience. How can you indeed, as a government, as a society, offer opportunities to all your people?
Under your sponsorship, you arranged the Orange Day. It was for bicycles.
Yes, it started out actually as one of these things that we try to offer on the basis of our experience. You know that the Netherlands is a fairly small country with a high population density. That means that we have to be smart about how we organize our transport and how we face issues like congestion with too much traffic. We find that in our inner cities, using bicycles is a great relief on all the cars that we otherwise would have. So it started out as a sort of exchange where we had a seminar explaining to our Egyptian counterparts, how can you make biking more attractive, also in an urban setting of Cairo? How can you decongest the traffic streams in the city?
It can also it can only be done in Zamalek. I don't think it's that all roads are prepared to have bicycles, and many people are offensive against women driving bicycles.
I'm glad to say that we had quite a few women in our Orange Bike Day. The first one was I think a couple of hundred people. The last one that we had in last November was already a couple of thousand people, I would say almost. So every next bike day got bigger and bigger. And yes, you're right, it is possible at this moment only in Zamalek on Friday morning, because then there's of course less traffic. But what we are trying to do also is to show how can you broaden the presence of bikes, how can you make it safer for bikes, bike lanes, other measures. So we are looking very much also to publicize how you can extend the use of bicycles in other parts of Cairo.
You have been represented to the Arab nation, not only in Egypt. You said that you have been in Iraq and Kuwait. You can find difference in dealing with the Arab people according to their countries?
Very much so. Just before I came to Egypt, I was in Libya, the neighbors. As I was saying before, I've had very interesting
the hot spots.
I've had very interesting postings. Of course, while I was in Libya, the regime of Gaddafi came to an end, and we had to organize a big evacuation for all the Dutch people. But the point is also that Libya is maybe a neighbor of Egypt, very close to Egypt, but a very different country. In mentality, when I knew I was going to Egypt, I even tried to get language lessons there. But I said, you know, please get me somebody who can teach me Egyptian. I said, well, we are Libyan, we don't speak Egyptian, it's really different. You know? So it's not just the language, it's also the culture, the way that people are with each other. I learned in Libya that Libya is, for example, much more tribal in its culture than Egypt has ever been. Another thing, of course, is that Libya is a very big country with a very small population, whereas people in Egypt, well, the country is not small, but people in Egypt live in very small areas, so yes, where you see people, it's very densely populated. So these are very big differences in society in Libya and in Egypt. I can go on, of course, about the differences with other countries, but I'm sure you know much better than me how different all the Arab countries are. And yet, they are also united, I think, by a common culture, a common heritage, a common religion. So it's always a challenge to balance the differences and the similarities between the Arab countries.
Egyptian market offers opportunity for Dutch companies in the transportation, communication. The private sector did realize the opportunities available in the Egyptian economic?
Yes, as we were talking about before, Egypt has a very large population. By the last count, more than 90 million people live in Egypt. And that means that the consumer market is quite substantial. So these companies do very well in Egypt. They know how to find the consumers here. Some of them are producing here in Egypt and are creating employment opportunities for people. Others are now starting to invest in Egypt and starting to produce products. So we are very much a presence in the economic sense.
In today's fast-moving, integrated world economy, potential investors seeking to gain access to a thriving market should look no further. Egypt is your access to the world. The routes are paved, the infrastructure is set, natural resources are readily available. New laws have opened new doors. A 26 million strong skilled labor force is on call. 1.6 billion consumers are waiting. The stock market is on the rise. The potential for high return is prime. The economy is in line for versatile growth and stability is firmly in place.
We have a lot of things that might attract the European tourists. But we don't have enough tourists from the Kingdom of the Netherlands. I don't know why. We have beach tourism, we have safari tourism, but we don't have enough tourism from the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Why?
The Netherlands was one of the biggest contributors, I think, to tourism before 2011. The story is unfortunately a familiar one. When a country goes into a period of political upheaval, tourists are getting a bit shy. This is what happened with the Dutch tourists as well. But the good news is that in recent times it has been picking up. Dutch tourists are coming back to Egypt. I'm being told this morning when preparing for this interview that actually the most favorite destination of Dutch tourists outside Europe is Egypt at this point in time, bigger than, for example, places like Curaçao in the West Indies or other North African countries. So we are on the way back, and I'm very confident that the Dutch tourist will be again hopefully a good example and presence here in Egypt.
We have a really long time, since long time we have been exchanging knowledge about the water resources between Egypt and the Kingdom of the Netherlands, maybe since 1976 or something. We know that we might face problems in Egypt in our water resources maybe the next few years. What do you think you can do to support our rights in the water of the Nile.
When it comes to the scarcity of water in Egypt, which is always a problem, what we have to offer is technology that allows you to grow agricultural products with less water. It makes a big difference how you use water in agriculture. You can spray it from the top, for example, or you can bring it directly to the roots. If you spray it on top, a lot of it will evaporate with the sunshine. If you put it in the roots, and there's technology to do that, then you need much less water to get the same result. That's one thing. Another thing is that we are working on technology that would allow crops to grow also with more salted kind of soils. This has always been a problem. How can you grow agricultural produce with salted soil? We try to also provide some technology there. We also work with the Egyptian side on coastal lands. How can you use coastal lands to a better degree for population but also for agriculture? Finally, we also have a focus area on sanitation and drinking water, where we try to bring our experience and our technology to benefit Egypt.
You've been a journalism?
Yes, that's true. My first two job applications were for...
Being a journalist is not easy.
It's not easy, and I learned a lot in the short period that I worked as a journalist. I was a financial economic journalist in Amsterdam, and in that period covered Dutch companies and economic data. And what happened is that while I was working already as a journalist, I also got hired by Foreign Affairs, because they had a procedure that took much longer to finish, and at the end of that procedure they gave me a call and said, we would like you to join the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I said, well, you know, I have to think about that, because I already have a job that I enjoy very much, so can I get back to you? And they were very like, how can you say that? I mean, we just told you can work for us, so you just say yes. So I will come back to it. And then I thought to myself, okay, I will go and work for Foreign Affairs as long as it's fun. As long as I can enjoy the work, I will continue with Foreign Affairs. Anytime that I get bored or that I think I don't have an interesting job anymore, I can always try and get back into journalism. I can't do the reverse. If I want to ever try again to get into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they will not allow me. If I say no to them now, that's my last chance. So I thought, okay, then in that sense I will now choose to go for Foreign Affairs as long as it's fun. And I must say it's remained fun all through. I've had postings, done different kinds of jobs, and always had a feeling that this was exciting, new, relevant. So I just kept on going with Foreign Affairs, unfortunately maybe for my journalistic ambitions.
Okay. You've been here in Egypt for how long?
I've been here for 2.5 years now.
Okay. Of course you have your own diplomatic agenda.
Yes, as I said before, what we feel is important is that we are a partner of Egypt in this transition to a society and a country that has more democracy, that has more rule of law, that has a more full participation of all the population in the important processes in society. And in that sense, my mission here is to offer this partnership wherever we can work together with Egypt on these kinds of issues. I think there also it's a mutually beneficial process. On the one hand, I think it offers Egypt also diversification and further economic growth, and for the Netherlands it offers similar opportunities. So that, of course, is what I'm also trying to do here. Look for these opportunities, get the right people to use these opportunities from either side.
I'm really honored to have you on my show. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation.
And thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.